I don't know if you've noticed it. I have 2 hearing aids. I'm very deaf. I'm not understanding. Everybody's yelling. I'm doing the best I can.
Welcome to the B&J Show. Let's rock and roll. Rock and roll. Come on, everybody. Let's lose control. Brad and John never wants to follow. Yeah, ready for the ride. It's the B&J Show. B&J Show.
John, have we got some stuff to talk about today, my brother?
It's one of those days where you need to turn up your hearing aid.
I do. I need to turn up my hearing aid. You know, that's the one thing that all the years that I've been in the radio business, wearing headphones all the time, you know, shooting guns, being around loud equipment, loud lawnmowers and things like that, my hearing is still pretty damn good. Matter of fact, I had it checked, I don't know, 3 or 4 years ago, and the lady even said, wow, your hearing's really good. So
it's amazing how many targets you've shot at, and you've had no shrapnel head straight to your ear.
Well, you know,
you clearly haven't covered any Lucas Kuntz events.
That's because that before I go to the shooting range, I call up Lucas and I said, Lucas, explain to me how many feet I should be away from these steel targets. And he go, 5 feet, which should be fine. Okay, thank you, Mr. Kuntz. Okay, John, that is John Combest, C-O-M-B-E-S-T. I spell it because you need to type in his name on your iPad, on your tablet, on your smartphone, on your desktop, and you need to put a John in front of it, johncombest.com, which will take you to his site, which has a plethora. You like that word, plethora? I don't think I've ever used that before.
Yeah, I pronounce it plethora, but I'm not a nitpicker, Brad.
Plethora. Okay, whatever. Plethora of information on that, and usually he's got links to 20 or 30 or 40, maybe even sometimes 50 different stories around the state of Missouri. But we start the morning off with this guy. And I did it again. I did my rewiring here, John, and I had to move some stuff around, so I forgot to. I have to do something different now. So we start the morning off with this guy.
I'm Casey Kasem.
And what does he do? He starts with number...
In third place.
Public safety issue. And I bring it up as number 3, Brad, because it's a topic that you have a lot of knowledge on, and I don't. And maybe you can shed a little bit of light into this. There was a fire yesterday in Fredericktown at one of the world's one of the world's largest lithium-ion battery facilities. Did you happen to see the story, Brad?
I did, and matter of fact, I probably know a little bit more about this than I should because of dealing with the various fire departments. But go ahead, and then I'll tell you afterwards my read on this, which is sort of interesting.
Yeah, so I have 2 pieces up today. One is from Fox 2 in St. Louis, and then actually the more thorough piece is brought to us by the Missouri Independent. They have an environmental advocacy content creator named Allison Kite, who always does a really thorough job. And she did a really thorough job with this piece talking about the fire there. Now, Brad, here's what I want some insight on because I don't understand it that well. Apparently, this facility takes lithium-ion batteries that are recycled, either lithium-ion batteries that are recycled or traditional batteries that are recycled as well, and then they mine for the valuable minerals that are in these batteries, and then they take those raw materials and they ship it somewhere else. Do I have that right, or do they not touch traditional batteries? Can you smarten me up a little bit on this?
I believe it's pretty much all the more advanced lithium-ion batteries. What's gotten interesting is right here in St. Louis, you've got a company called EPC, and they started out years and years and years ago by selling used computers. They have a big facility out in, I guess that's technically Wright City out there in I-70. They have a retail location out in St. Charles on Truman, which is north of 70, Cape Springs to the south, Truman to the north, and then they have another retail location. Well, anyway, their recycling thing is there is big money being made in recycling electronic components because they use a lot of rare earth elements as well as like things like silver and gold, like in plated contacts on circuit boards and stuff like that. So this has gotten to be like a big industry. It takes a lot of money to get into it, and it's a tough industry because of the fact that there's so many environmental things you have to you've got to toe the line with all the environmental agencies.
Yeah, it seems like it. And it seems like this is one of those things that folks would have anticipated years ago, that there would be high demand for all these. So then you have a whole lot of people flooding the industry that frankly probably don't have a lot of experience managing these things. I thought it was unique, Brad, that in the Fox 2 coverage, they interviewed the attorney for the company. Do you know who the attorney for the company is?
Oh, don't tell me. Is it somebody we know?
Yeah, I wouldn't say we know him. You're familiar with the name, and I'll give you a hint. It's not Scott Rosenblum.
It's his brother, Jason.
It is not. It is Al Watkins. Remember Al Watkins?
Good old Al Watkins. Yes, Al Watkins. The guy who $100,000 in cash shows up at his office, and I have no idea where it came from. It's just money from heaven. You remember that whole deal with the
manna? Yeah, manna from heaven.
Right.
So as of last night, according to Allison Kite's piece, the Madison County posted a note on their Facebook page, which is, boy, is that not a sign of the times. They go to Facebook to post it. And then as of last night, I believe Miss Kite said that as of 7:30 last night, the fire was still going on and crews were still trying to control it. So as I understand it, and again, you know more about this than I do, Brad, but this isn't like sending your firefighter crew in to put out, a brush fire. Like this is way more involved than that.
This has gotten to be a hot topic, pardon the pun, with the firefighters, and we have as clients both Wentzville Fire Protection and also the Central County Fire Protection District. And this is a big, and matter of fact, I actually went to the grand opening. They commissioned a new truck out at Cottleville, one of the Cottleville houses, and one of the things they talked about was that they have an abnormal rate of cancer among firefighters because of things like this. Is that they're going into, back in the old days, you had a fire, somebody's house caught on fire and it had, wood and carpet and stuff like that. Well, now even houses have all this stuff that when it burns, it throws off these toxic gases. And the problem with like these batteries is there's an infamous, matter of fact, talking about, I don't know if I ever told you this story or not. This is sort of like, I'm a lawn cutting nerd, but talking about a PR nightmare. I guess it was 2 or 3 years ago, DeWalt had a big display at one of the premier lawn maintenance conventions in the country. I think it was in Knoxville, Tennessee. This is like one of the big ones where all the guys who are in lawn maintenance, cutting grass and stuff like that show up at this convention. And they were debuting their brand new battery-powered commercial zero-turn lawnmower. And luckily enough, it was outside at a booth. The thing caught fire. And there's all sorts of videos on YouTube of the fire department shows up. And what's interesting about it is the firemen don't put on their masks. They just, roll out the hose and they put the thing out and it reflames. And they do this like 6 or 7 times. And then they go and get a dry chemical extinguisher. It goes out and then it reignites itself. Supposedly the end of the story was at some point in time, they had a forklift come and pick the thing up. They dug a hole and they buried it because they could not get the thing to, they could not extinguish the fire. This has gotten to be a real problem because there's a term, I think it's like thermal runaway or something like that, where what happens is that no matter what you do to try to extinguish it, except for like literally bury it, you can't get the thing to stop burning because it just keeps like reigniting itself. Does that make any sense?
It does. It sounds like our listeners' love for our show, Brad.
Well,
no matter what we try to do to extinguish it, we take a few days off and then we come back and they're still there, Brad.
Well, and there's the other aspect of this is that the cars that they've had this happen with the cars that got, in the flood down in with North Carolina and a lot of those areas, the electric cars that got submerged, a bunch of those caught on fire because the water gets into places it shouldn't and it shorts it out. Once again, what do I talk about all the time? What's one of my favorite things I talk about?
Fossil fuels and the law of unintended consequences.
Exactly. This is a perfect example of the law of unintended consequences. You've got a new kind of fuel out there being these high-tech batteries, and they are marvelous. And if you're into power tools, I think I had my first cordless drill 40 years ago, and the thing would run for like 10 minutes. I've got DeWalt. I've got DeWalt, I've got Milwaukee, I've got Makita. Some of these tools I can use all day and not recharge the battery. And they've come so far in that, but yet it's a really tricky technology. And to the point where, every once in a while you see this on planes where like somebody's cell phone will go into like this same thing. And matter of fact, I don't know if you know this or not, they actually have special bags. Do you know about this on the airliners now?
Yeah. Where you can't just throw the battery in the old trash incinerator.
Well, no, they have these special bags that are on most of the commercial flights now, where if somebody's cell phone starts to go up in flames, they throw it in this bag and they seal it, and supposedly it will. I don't know if it's made out of asbestos or what it's made out of, which is another great thing to have on an airplane. But yeah, it's got to be.
I didn't know that. Wow.
Oh yeah. Matter of fact, you can I don't know if it's required or not. It probably would be an FAA thing. And if you remember the original, when the Dreamliners came out, the original Boeing Dreamliners, when they first with the 787s, they had the same problem. They had the batteries which were catching fire. I'm going okay, you don't want to have your battery catch fire at 30,000 feet. You know what I mean? It's.
I do know. Well, regardless of, I know we're running late for story number 3 here, but if you're in Fredericktown and you're with the fire department, you can contact me. I have a place off of Highway 367 in North St. Louis County where you can dump your toxic material. I mean, where we can Brad and I will dispose of it properly. There's already signs up. You and I already put signs up, Brad. We just know a little creek where we can get rid of that stuff.
We're
the Russell Bliss of Fredericktown.
Right. We'll just back those trucks up to the Coldwater Creek and just dump it right there, right?
That's exactly right.
It can't get any worse, right? Okay, number 2.
Up a notch to number 2.
You have been on the forefront of stories involving St. Charles County voting and the traffic backups. Uniquely, yesterday, there was an injunction, a temporary restraining order filed by a local Republican committeeman. And Brad, I have a story up today. This is brought to us in the Post-Dispatch by Ethan Colbert. You may want to call him Ethan Colbert. But a Republican committeeman, it turns out, I looked it up, he's from the O'Fallon Township, has filed a lawsuit, a temporary restraining order, a request to get Kurt Bahr to allow poll watchers in the early voting places. Now, the concept, Brad, I don't know if you've spent much time studying the concept of poll watchers, but in general, poll watchers have been used for decades to keep an eye to make sure there's no mischief, to make sure there's no monkey business at polling places. And political parties, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican, or I believe even a Libertarian, can come in and observe on election day the processes at a polling place or at a vote counting facility. Now, what's thrown a monkey wrench in this, or as Brad Hildebrand would say, a law of unintended consequences, is that when you move up voting dates to early voting, what happens to the poll watchers? Should the poll watchers be able to stand there at an early voting place and actually watch the voting take place? Now, this gentleman who's a committeeman from O'Fallon, his name is Travis Allen Hines, he says, well, look, ballots are being counted at early voting facilities. We have the right to have our poll watchers there. So Kurt Bahr is quoted in the Post-Dispatch, and I believe he put out a statement yesterday as well that says, look, voting is taking place as normal. This was just a request for an injunction, I guess you could say. And I don't think they've made any determinations, they being Kurt Bahr. I don't think he's made a determination yet of whether he will allow poll watchers into the polls. But the bottom line is you can still vote early today. Folks will still be lined up until they work this whole thing out, Brad.
Now, I know a little bit more about this than I should, because I heard the interview this morning before I got on the air with Travis Hines and Mark Cox in 97.1.
Oh, okay. Yeah, that's right. He's going to be on Cox's show.
Yeah,
he was.
Well,
on
he was.
Yeah,
he
right.
was about 6:20 or so. Okay. Here's the thing and I'm not trying to inject myself into the story, but you know my crazy story where I go out to the election authority out there and I talk to, what's the guy's name? Mark Parkinson, that's the guy.
Yeah.
And
Mark Parkinson. He works for Kurt Bahr.
Right. Long story made short, I asked for a list of all the voters and their addresses, and he questioned me why I wanted that. And he says it's on the website. I go, no, it's not. And he looked on the website and it wasn't. So he gives me this thing, well, I'll email it to you. 2 days go by, I don't get it. So I go back out there and I talk to, of all people, Kurt Bahr, and Kurt tells me the same thing. It's on the website. No, Kurt, it's not. I was out here 2 days ago, talked to Mark. It's not on the website. So he says to me, well, I just can't give it to you. You're going to have to file a Freedom of Information Act. Why is Kurt being, and I'm going to say this is my own interpretation, a butthead about this? Why isn't it just, and you're exactly right. That's what this whole thing revolves around, the fact that okay, so in other words, it's okay to have the poll watchers on the actual election day, but are not allowed in on the early voting days? I mean, to me, it makes total sense. If you're going to have a rule that applies to Election Day, shouldn't that be any day where people are casting ballots? Don't you think that's...
Yeah, I mean, I personally think so. Now, to be fair, and I want to be clear because I want to clean up my language here, it looks like Kurt Bahr says this is not an injunction. It is not a court order. It is a request for an injunction. And, Brad, Kurt Bahr does go on to say that poll watchers and poll challengers would be allowed if they're required by a judge. I guess your point, Brad, is why was he being obstreperous about it early on when he should have just said yes from the beginning?
He had this deal recently. I don't know if you got the press release on this. I got the press release on it, that they had a public viewing that you could go out and watch them test the machines, okay?
Yeah.
And once again, they're trying to say, hey, we're not trying to hide anything. So why is he trying to, to me, it's like, and the interesting part about this is that the judge agreed with Travis Hines. The judge essentially said, yeah. I've read the ordinance. I read whatever the legal mumbo jumbo is. I agree, and that's how the whole thing started. I'm going like, why do you fight this? And if you're going to be like Mr. We're very transparent and open here. Then essentially, if a guy comes along and says, hey, you know what, you need to have watchers and whatever they call them, and the interesting thing is, here's the thing that Travis Hines pointed out. He said that the way the law is written, that they only have to have watchers and whatever they call it, observers. There's two different categories. They only have to have them when the ballots are being counted. And he said that Kurt Bahr said the ballots aren't being counted, but yet he pointed out press releases from Kurt Bahr's office that, well, yesterday we had X amount of people vote, and they counted the ballots. So in other words, the idea being is Kurt saying, we're not counting the ballots, but by the nature of him releasing a press release saying we had X amount of, ballots that were, submitted yesterday.
Tabulated.
They did count the ballots. So it's once again, it's like this legal mumbo jumbo stuff. And to me, it's like, okay, Kurt, and I'm not trying to be a jerk, but I think I don't think he's doing himself any good. There was the debacle with all the crap that happened in August, and then this. It's like, dude, I think you're digging yourself into a hole. But that's my own opinion. I mean, do you shed light on that? Your idea on it?
No, because we have 1 minute left in the segment.
Okay.
The number one.
What do Brad Hildebrand and Crystal Quade have in common? You care to venture a guess there, Brad?
We both love billboards.
You both love billboards. You're both fastidious about punctuation and spelling, as evidenced by spelling Greg Keller's name wrong on the original YouTube yesterday. No, Brad, what you have in common with Crystal Quade is a love of Lorenzo von Matterhorn. Who's Lorenzo von Matterhorn, Brad?
Go ahead, John. You tell us.
Lorenzo von Matterhorn is a fictional character from a fictional character on How I Met Your Mother. We know that Crystal Quade loves How I Met Your Mother. Well, it's a fact that I gleaned by listening to Crystal Quade's interview with our buddy Mark Bland on the Q Now podcast. That's over on KYRO 105.3 FM. That's 1280 AM, based out of Troy. Mark had Crystal Quade on. Actually, the interview took place last week. Mark just posted it yesterday. But Crystal Quade goes through the normal talk about her governor's race. And because Mark is a great interviewer in the style of Brad Hildebrand, Mark doesn't do the same old bland, boring interview that most interviewers do. He asked her a few fun questions after they talked about serious stuff. She got a chance to talk a little bit about her roller derby career, Brad, her history there. She talked about the fact that if there's one thing she doesn't understand, it's people watching golf on television. I'm right there with Crystal Quade on that. And also, she talked about Mark asked, what TV show do you put on if you just like want some comfort TV, like if you're cleaning or you're doing some activity? And she said, How I Met Your Mother. So, Brad, this is the time of the campaign when, everybody's winding down. We're reflecting on the last year on the campaign trail. And maybe we can have a few lighthearted moments with candidates. Crystal Quade is a fan of How I Met Your Mother.
John, I find it sad that someone like Crystal Quade, who I think is a fascinating woman, And I'm going to get myself in trouble by saying this because I would much rather see her as governor than Mike Kehoe. I really would. I think she.
Yeah, you're a contrarian, and you do the whole underdog.
I'm telling you,
the whole underdog thing.
I'm telling you. Mike Kehoe. I love his backstory. He's a St. Louis guy, and he worked his way up through the ranks at Dave Sinclair. I think he started out washing cars down at the Ford dealership down in South County, and worked his way up through. Once again, I think they both have tremendous backstories, but obviously Mike Kehoe is an insider, and Crystal Quade is she's sort of in the door frame. She's not an insider. She's not an outsider. She's sort of.
Yeah, she definitely has a frame, Brad.
Right. Okay, John. John?
Boy, does she have a frame. Brad, what folks don't know is that you have posters on your bedroom wall of the Washington Generals. Like, most people like the Globetrotters, but you're like, I don't care if they get blown out by 60 points a game. I'm a Washington Generals fan. They're an underdog.
You know what? I've gone to Globetrotters games and I've cheered for the Generals. So you're exactly right.
I did not know that, but I am not surprised.
Matter of fact, there's an interesting story behind that. This guy his name's Jesse something or other, who's the guy that is the owner of the Savannah Bananas. He's a motivational speaker, and he recently posted an interesting video about him comparing the Savannah Bananas to the Harlem Globetrotters. It's funny you should bring this up. And he gave some interesting trivia. Like, I think was it Wilt Chamberlain or Walt Chamberlain? Is it Wilt?
Yeah, Wilt Chamberlain. Yeah.
He played for the Harlem Globetrotters before he played in the NBA because he loved the Globetrotters, and he, as a young man, right out of college, whatever like that, he felt it was his duty to play for the Harlem Globetrotters. I think he played for them 2 years, and then he went into the NBA. Just think if he would have spent those 2 years in at the NBA instead of the Harlem Globetrotters, what his numbers would be today, because he's already just this Hall of Fame guy. Okay, I
think he's got plenty of numbers. From what I understand, Wilt Chamberlain's not doing too poor in the numbers department. But I like the basketball metaphor. I'm glad you're shooting your shot at Crystal Quade, Brad.
John,
I might be projecting there.
I think we better take a break before I get myself into trouble here. Or no, John gets himself into trouble. It's not me. Okay.
Thanks for checking out the Brad and John Show podcast. This segment of the show is brought to you by John Combest's book, Stalking, Harassment, Internet Trolling, A Guide to Recovering and Rebuilding After Online Attacks. It's a great reference if you've ever been the unfortunate target of a social media attack. It's available on Amazon. Just search John Combest. That's Combest, John Combest, and the book will show up in your search results. Now it's time for another segment of the Brad and John Show. Can you handle it?